Kia ora te whānau. It's my privilege and pleasure to introduce the first RIMA podcast. My name is Louise Chan. I'm the Clinical Director of Te Araro Access and Choice here at Think Hauora. I'd like to introduce Febry Sahato, who is the RIMA Wellbeing Coordinator. Kia ora, Febry.
Kia ora, Louise. Thank you for the introduction. How are you?
Kei te pai aho. I'm well, thanks. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your role, Febry.
Sure, of course. I'm the RIMA Wellbeing Coordinator. RIMA stands for Refugee, Internally Displaced Person, Migrant and Asylum Seeker. My role is to connect the RIMA community to access better healthcare services within the MidCentral Rohe.
That sounds super interesting. How did this role come about, Febry?
Yeah, it is very interesting, isn't it? So the background to this role came about from my research when I was doing my master degree at Massey University. The research was entitled Exploring the Refugee Disability Interface, a case study of the needs of the Palmerston North Muslim community. The findings of my research found there was 5 main barriers for former refugee accessing healthcare services in Palmerston North, which is language, housing and transportation, culture misunderstanding, stereotypes, and lack of information. Therefore, this role was specifically designed to bring the research into life.
And where did your interest and passion come from originally, Febry?
So it started when I decided to do my development practicum at Red Cross, which later aligned with my thesis research. A little bit about myself. I'm originally from Indonesia. However, I grew up here in Aotearoa. My father did his PhD here at Massey University, long time ago at the same department that I went to. During his study, my mother and I also went to school, and later my little sister was born, so she's a Kiwi. Around 2003, we went back to Indonesia, and destiny just brought me back here, following my father's footsteps. And back in Indonesia, I graduated as Bachelor of Social Welfare. And during my study, I have started to work in the Ministry of Social Affairs as a social worker. So not long after my graduation, I became a registered social worker. And I have been very passionate to specialize on child welfare and people with disabilities. I have been working as a social worker back in Indonesia for more than 4 years before I decided to pursue my master degree here. Long story short, I went to Massey. And on my final year, I decided to do development practicum. So with the work experience and expertise that I have, I then got introduced by Rochelle Stewart, who was my supervisor at Massey University, to Heather Browning at Red Cross, who later became my supervisor, as at that time she was the volunteer program lead at Red Cross. Heather and I share the same passion regarding people with disabilities, and she has been working in the health sector for many years. Therefore, my development practicum at Red Cross was particularly interested to explore the needs of former refugees to access health services in Palmerston North, as they identify that as a challenge for a long time.
And how long was your practicum at Red Cross?
So the practicum itself was for about 6 months. However, as I was a refugee support volunteer, which all aligned together with the development practicum and the research, it expands to about a year.
So that's quite a lot of time that you're involved in these communities.
Yeah, I have been very pleased to be able to work with the community, because back in Indonesia, it has never come across my mind that I would have the privilege to be working with former refugees, as Indonesia does not have a national refugee system. However, many asylum seekers are accepted and protected in the country. And on the other hand, New Zealand is not only a country that accepts refugees, but also one of the few countries that accept refugees with special needs, including medical needs, to be part of the New Zealand annual refugee quota.
That makes such a big difference, that.
Absolutely. It is such a huge difference. And New Zealand just increased their New Zealand annual refugee quota as of July 2020 to 1,500. And the fact that I'm doing this research here in New Zealand and being able to give back to the community means a lot to me.
You must have met so many interesting people through those connections at Red Cross.
Of course. From my practical and research journey, I have been very fortunate to meet people from different cultures and realize how diverse the community is in Palmerston North. I'm also very honored to meet and work with people from different service providers, especially in the health sector. As my practicum was focusing on people with high health needs and people with disabilities, so I have been working for the DHB and I'm involved in the telehealth project as a consumer representative. Beside that, I'm also an Indonesian interpreter for Easy Speak, and to add a little bit about Easy Speak, we have just launched Easy Speak Health and working with almost all the New Zealand health service providers to create a way for healthcare professionals to communicate across languages, and I believe this will be very helpful to bridge the barriers that we mentioned earlier.
And how many languages do you speak, Febry?
I'm fluent in Bahasa Indonesia and English, but I also learned Arabic, German, Japanese, Korean, Bahasa Melayu. And in Indonesia, there are more than 300 native languages, which I'm fortunate to learn at 3.
Something that's really close to my heart, eh? The ability to have a wider lens on culture can come through such a greater understanding of language, and the closer you can get to people through being able to speak in their first tongue. Coming from Europe, I had the opportunity to learn French and Spanish while I was growing up. I really love Spanish. In fact, my parents live in Spain. Since living in Aotearoa, I'm working on a greater understanding of Te Reo Māori.
Awesome, that's very good. I'm also going to join the forthcoming Te Reo Māori classes at Think Haura. So yes, that is the background of my research. And after I completed my study, I presented my research here at Think Haura, and I remember in the end of the presentation, you then asked me, so Febry, what can we do to change the world by Friday 5 p.m? And that really inspired me to start this project with you to bring the research into life and make changes by Friday 5 p.m.
So that's when we met together, and we had a few sessions around looking at the research and looking at what practically we could do within our rohi and our region for the communities that we serve.
Yes, so that's where the WeBridge approach comes into place.
I remember when we first met up, we were looking at what kind of service we could provide in terms of connection, navigation. We looked at the think part of Think Haura as a starting point. Think standing for technology, health, innovation, networks and knowledge. And that's where the WeBridge approach came about, looking at bridge in the same way.
WeBridge represent we are benevolent, we respect choice, we are inclusive, we encourage diversity, we are genuine, we are equitable, WeBridge.
And once we had an approach, then we were able to start working on a model. We began with the mission statement. WeBridge aims to connect communities for wellbeing through improved participation, greater empowerment, and the creation of a more culturally inclusive healthcare experience.
Yes, and following with the target population, which is RIMA.
What we didn't realise at the time, was that RIMA actually has different meanings in different languages.
Yeah, so in Japanese it means advantage or benefit. In Bahasa Indonesia it's a peaceful way of life. In Arabic it means white deer, or a symbol of skillfully effective change. And then I discover RIMA in Te Reo Māori means 5, which align with the 5 main barriers to access health services, as well as the 5 stage of service planning of the RIMA project for the next 12 months.
And there's also the official definitions of each part of RIMA, Febry.
Yeah, so refugee is someone who has been forced to flee from the country of nationality due to a well-founded fear of persecution. Furthermore, Palmerston North has settled more than 2,000 refugees since 2006, and the majority are identified as Muslim.
Internally displaced persons, the difference there would be that someone who's been forced to flee but remains within their country's borders. In 2019, there are approximately 1,300 new internally displaced people who have been relocated within New Zealand.
Yes, and further, migrant is someone who has chosen to leave his or her country of nationality to make a new life in a new country.
That'd be you and me, Febry?
Absolutely. In fact, there has been an average of 1,300 people, like us, that has chosen to settle in Palmerston North every year.
1,300? That's a lot of people,
That is quite a lot of people, absolutely.
An asylum seeker is an individual who seeks international protection, someone whose application for refugee status has not yet been determined. However, no data or statistics showing the number of asylum seekers in New Zealand as yet. And that's one of the things we want to work on, Febry. That data collection and looking at some kind of repository or collection of data, initially relating to Palmerston North and the MidCentral Rohi, and then connecting into other organisations nationwide.
Definitely. As we mentioned earlier as well, that one of the barriers for the community in accessing health was the lack of data and information. Therefore, having a repository would be very helpful to address the needs of the RIMA community to access better healthcare services.
So that brings us on to our goals over the next 12 months. In regards to the RIMA Wellbeing Coordinator position and RIMA within the Te Arorau Access and Choice Service here at Think Hawora.
Yeah, and the two main aims are firstly to improve health outcomes for RIMA population and disabilities or high health needs, and secondly to improve communication and connection between service providers and RIMA population with disabilities or high health needs.
And the way we're going to look at that, Febry, is through 5 stages of service planning, the first of which will be network development.
Yes, it will be introducing and connecting RIMA to our Rohe.
This leads really well into relationship management. One of the biggest things we'll be focusing on is building relations with service providers, with the communities, and looking at the connection within the communities themselves to ensure all those better health outcomes.
And after that, we'll be looking in the data collection. In data collection, we'll be working alongside community and service providers in conjunction with Tekete Korero here at Think Hawora.
And the penultimate area of focus is bridging health barriers. And there's a number of ways in which we're going to look at this, Febry?
Yeah, one of which would be the New Zealand Health and Disability Codes of Rights translation. This New Zealand Health and Disability Codes of Rights translation came into my attention based on my experience as a refugee support volunteer. So in my role, I would be taking the family I'm supporting to a clinic or even to a hospital, and there I see the New Zealand Health and Disability Codes of Rights that was hung in almost every corner. However, most of it will be in English, and I found none that is in a language that could be understandable for the RIMA community. So, and further, on my research that I conduct, many of the former refugees are not aware of their own rights. Therefore, at the end of the practicum placement, I work with friends and colleagues to translate the New Zealand Health and Disability Codes of Rights into several languages that could be accessible for the former refugee community.
And how many languages have you already translated this into?
So I translated into 5 languages so far, which is Bahasa Indonesia, Bahasa Melayu, Arabic, Persian, and Hindi.
And are there any plans for further development within this area?
Absolutely. So within my role, we are looking to further develop it into languages that can be accessible as well as understandable for the RIMA community. And hopefully we'll be able to circulate it and start hanging it in clinics and hospitals.
And are there languages that are only verbal and not written?
Yes. In fact, Rohingya don't have a written language. They only have spoken word.
So one of the areas for further opportunities then possibly could be an audio version?
Correct. And based on my research, not everybody is able to read even on their own language. So providing an audio version would be very helpful.
And I guess one of the most innovative ways of reducing health barriers, bridging gaps, is through this RIMA podcast. The RIMA podcast aims to access different parts of the community and enables information to be given in a different way.
Yes, and the content will include introduction to service providers and services that's available in MidCentral, health information, voice of people, events, and opportunities for RIMA community to run a podcast episode.
There's huge amounts of potential, within the podcast for different things to happen.
Yeah, and I'm so excited. So stay tuned, everyone. So that brings us to the end of this episode, a brief introduction of RIMA Wellbeing Project and the plans for the next 12 months.
I'm really looking forward to meeting so many different people and hearing all of their different stories.
I'm really looking forward to it too. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and click on the bell button so you don't miss out any RIMA podcast episode. Also share to your whānau.
Check out the Think Hawora website at www.thinkhawora.nz.
Also check out Think Hawora Facebook page and click on the link on the description to give us your feedback about the podcast.
Ka kite no. Kia ora.
Kia ora!